A few months ago, Amy asked me to do the series on women in the Bible. And I don't think either one of us knew that yesterday is the International Day of the Women. So it's in appropriately, and also with regards to Lent, because these women really give us a lot of strong messages about faith and courage and strength and the willingness to be forgiven and to forgive. They're warriors, they're judges, they're mothers, and many of them are Eves. So, in the Mr. Google says there are over 300 women in the Bible in the Old Testament, and about 180 are named. Some are, the mother, so and so, sisters, the three women did this, and the group of women did that sort of thing. So not everybody is named, but I'm working from named people, women that are named, and I'm starting with Eve. But I wanted to say a few things first about biblical order. There are really four purposes of it. The first is the oldest, and it's to comfort the dead. And we see that in the catechisms. Another reason is to teach. That's one of the main early purposes of it, is because for the most part until the printing press, which was what 1440, something like that. And even most people were not literate. They didn't have access to books, and messages were given by image or by oral tradition. And the third purpose would be to decorate. And if you think about the Sistine Chapel, for instance, or many other particularly Renaissance buildings, that was one of the main purposes. And the fourth is to convert, and this happened after the Council of Trent in 1545. This was the Catholic reaction to the Protestant Reformation, and it was called the Counter Reformation. And it was the largest boom art has ever seen. Okay. It's easy. Okay. Is it lovely?
So let's see if that happens.
Okay. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, so that's kind of, our spark where we're coming from with art in the Bible. And, I always say that I'm not a biblical scholar, so if anybody at any point would like to correct me, that's fine, just go ahead. I am an art history junkie, so this is right up my alley, and I love doing these presentations. So, starting with Eve, I just want you to, in your brain, come up with your, 3 sentences or 3 thoughts you would think about Eve. We all see her probably differently and with contradiction. And I'm going to show you some images that I'll say right off the bat. Eve does not wear clothes. So, one of the catacombs, there was biblical art, images of everything from the Mary and Jesus to Annunciation and numerous other subjects without the crucifixion. Before the Edict of Milan, which was when Constantine in 313 declared Christianity the official religion of Rome. And at that point, we started seeing sarcophagi decorated or carved with, for Christian burials, carved with scenes from, I really can't see this, you stand here, with biblical scenes, biblical stories. So this is one of the early ones of Adam and Eve, or the representation of their story. And we have a center figure here that is representing God, and we have 3 over here. And this is one of the first examples of the Trinity in art. And this particular God is creating Eve from Adam. Adam's still awake, his rib being removed. And over here, God is assigning, which is an early biblical image that we don't see anymore. He's assigning them jobs. Adam is to be a farmer and to grow wheat. This is a sheaf of wheat. And Eve is to be a weaver, and this is a lamb. So this is a really interesting early image, I think, and particularly with regard to the Trinity. And we will see a little bit of that again. This is another one. This is from Adelphia in Sicily. And God here is assigning the wheat and the weeding or the lamb, the housework, so to speak. And so far, he hasn't made any clothes, but. Sorry, I have to be a little bit funny. Anyway, also in the fourth century, we start to see, later in the fourth century, we start to see the tree of knowledge of good and evil in the center with a serpent wrapped around it.
Yeah.
That didn't happen at first. And you see here, Eve has already picked the piece of fruit. She's holding it in her hand, and Adam is reaching for it with his head turned away, which is kind of interesting, I think. I want you to watch in some of these early images, the left hands, because the left hand in early Christian art was considered devious. And I apologize for any of you lefties, but a lot of the sins happen with the left hand. So anyway, this is of course is right, but keep an eye on the left hand. So here again, you see the lamb and the wheat. I'm jumping from probably how many centuries, 6, to these incredible doors. Bishop Bernward in Hildesheim. They were initially done for the Abbey of St. Michael's, and they've been moved to the Cathedral of St. Mary, still in Hildesheim. They are a marvel, really, for when they were done. This is the Ottonian period. And each door was cast in one piece with a lost wax process. And that's an old, ancient, hasn't been really done in Christian art since antiquity. And the left side is is from Genesis. It's the story of the creation all the way to the murder of Abel. And the right side is from the Gospels, and it starts with the Annunciation and goes to the Ascension. So I want you to see this close up, because to me, these figures are so fresh. They're almost childlike and magical, but with such deep expression. And when you think of how this is done and the period is done, and this is after the iconoclastic controversy, which was the denial or the destruction of icons that happened in the mid-8th to mid-9th centuries. And there was a lot of resistance against Christian images or images of the figure, particularly if the figure was perfect and looked like a real human. Think about antiquity and the classical sculptures from there. And they wanted to eliminate that. So images were done more, I want to say symbolically or simply for a while, so that this graven image concept of anything on the earth, in the air, or in the water was not photographic in image. And there are a lot of things that slip through the cracks too. So, but anyway, look at this, the temptation fall. So you see, here we are left-handed. Eve has the apple, hands it to Adam, he has it, and she has another one. So keep in mind that there is not a single one. Also, the original word for the fruit of the tree of life was peri, P-R-I, that was the Hebrew word, and it just is a generic word for fruit. And it was really in the 12th century in France that it was designated to be an apple. that cream kind of light. This is just incredible. I just want to laugh and smile and go, wow, every time I see this. But look how God's head comes out. It's just so gestural, so animated. As he accuses Adam, Adam, of course, has no backbone, no strength to take, credit for anything he's done. And he points to Eve, and she immediately points to the serpent. And at this point, the serpent is still an animal, it's not a snake, because it hasn't been condemned by God yet, but it becomes in later images a serpent that crawls. Now, you all think this is just amazing. I know it seems primitive compared to other art you've seen, but it's just, I think, magical. Here's a detail of that where you can see a little more of their bodies. The images of this online are not the greatest, but I think the expression's pretty incredible.
Paint or some other.
It's bronze. Yeah,
Oh,
they're
this is
bronze, yeah. And here is the expulsion, where the figures are a little more classical, you'd say, a little more defined in terms of physical muscular structure. Interesting that they're expelled from the Garden of Eden. I never think of architecture being there, but sometimes it appears. And I bet that some of you have been to Monte in Sicily and seen this cathedral. It is covered in mosaics. It's just an amazing, I haven't been there, but I've studied it a lot. This is, of course, after the fall, where God is again approaching Adam and Eve. The serpent has been condemned, and Adam and Eve are extremely embarrassed. They grab leaves, supposedly fig leaves, to themselves. And Adam again accuses Eve. He's pointing to her, and he's pointing to the serpent. So no one likes to take the blame. This is one of my favorite cathedrals this is a Romanesque cathedral in Autun, France. It's the Cathedral of Saint Lazare or Saint Lazarus, who was, canonized. He was, given the church was named after him. He is the patron saint of lepers. I suppose that's what he died from. Anyway, the church, these are additions, the spire and the pinnacles. They were added more in the Gothic period. But I want you to see the church because I'm going to set you up for a scene here. This is the tympanum of the west entrance. So this is strong medieval, early medieval, before the Gothic period, when the relief sculptures were flatter and they were carved on site, of course. And this is the Last Judgment. And this is the period of early pilgrimages and early crusades. And this church, Autun, is on the way to Vézelay in Santiago. So this is in the direct path of the crusades and the pilgrimages. And in the medieval period, everyone was a sinner, and the pilgrims came to pay penance, to be forgiven of their sins, and also to expose their sins, to admit their sins. So this church just sort of has, the whole theme of it is about redemption for your sins. This is on Christ's left is the damned, and on the right are the saved. And these are the little elders of the church who, if you can see them, they all have their little heads cranked up looking at Christ. And these are zodiac images. But it's absolutely an incredible work of art. And the Jeesley Burtis, who is the stonemason / architect, at that period, they were one and the same. He's one of the first names that we know in medieval art of the exact architect of these incredible buildings. This is a lintel, and I'm gonna show you the lintel from the north side now. I'll give you a minute to digest this. So, obviously this is Eve. Eve has taken on the role of the serpent. She is undulating, it's almost like she's underwater. She's sensuous. She's halfway glancing at us. And before this was moved, and I'll tell you that story, she had her hand wrapping around her face to hide her sin. And at the same time, her left arm goes back and she's having another apple, go passing one in. So it's kind of a reminder that we all sin, we do it again, right? So she's embarrassed though. She's covered herself with a plant. And she's just, I think it's just such a creative and imaginative way to show her, and particularly for the medieval period. And this Jeesley Burtis, I mean, everything on this cathedral is creative and shocking and eye-opening and just a reminder of who we are and you know, who our ancestors are, our biblical ancestors. Anyway, so it kind of brings back, you know, the issue with Eve. I mean, was she naive? Was she just young and dumb, innocent? Was she always sensuous and seductive? Was that her role? Was she a scapegoat? Was she set up? I mean, there are lots of ways you can look at her.
Jean, you may have some trouble getting into the movie here.
And I couldn't figure out how to admit.
I don't have a clue, so. Thank you.
Just click on fluid. Well, look, it
Oh, it
didn't.
didn't
This cathedral has an interesting story. We're going to look at the release, the whole sequence of Adam and Eve story, which is on the pillars, and that is most unusual. Usually in a Gothic church, you see the statuary at the portals, surrounding the portals, and maybe up in these upper rows. But this one has the carvings on, which are bas relief, which means they stand out sort of halfway and then they're very connected. This deep relief that we saw with Jeesley Burtis. So this is Italian Gothic in Umbria or Orvieto. And Pope Urban IV had this church built for a reason. In the town nearby Bolsena in 1263, there was a visiting priest. And in serving the Eucharist, he expressed some doubt about the transubstantiation. And at that point, the host bled onto the corporal. And the corporal was so stained that it was saved. And it is in the chapel of the corporal in this church. So that is that a lot of churches, or not a lot, some churches in the Romanesque and Gothic period were built with this sort of stimulation. They might have acquired relics of a certain biblical historical person or saint, and that's the church was built to house those relics. So anyway, let's look at these carvings. I'm just gonna run through them quickly. Matani, he was from Siena, and they're just incredible. They're full of detail. They're considerably more thought in the landscape, the mountainous area it's showing that's part of the garden. And the figures are, as I said, certainly more developed. This would be the same period, Giotto. And anybody who's been in my classes before knows what a fan I am of Giotto di Bondone and the Reina Chapel in Padua. So this is the same period as that. So we're starting to see more volume in the figures, a little more observation in naturalism, called naturalism in art, without the dissection that we see at the Renaissance, where every muscle is shown and, proportions become perfect again. God puts Adam to sleep over here, and that is Adam also, I guess, a young Adam. And the makes Eve from Adam's rib. And God's warning to them not to eat the fruit. They eat the fruit. God calls them and they cower over here out of embarrassment, humiliation. They're expelled from paradise. They're older here. The history wanted to point that out. It's not terribly significant, but. And here they are in their various jobs of spinning and carving. So we'll go to the Renaissance. This is 100 years later or so. So I'm comparing here, because I'm talking about art as well as religion. I'm comparing two areas of the Renaissance, the Northern Renaissance and the Southern Renaissance. The left side, Hugo van der Goes, this is the Northern Renaissance, the Flemish area. And this is, story has it that this is where oil painting started. And oil painting, as opposed to fresco or watercolor or tempera, allows way more detail. And the Northern Renaissance was obsessed with detail. So you can see in here the difference in the detail. They want to show like everything that's there, as opposed to the Southern Renaissance. Also, at this point, after the 12th century, we start to see the serpent have a very pretty young. I don't like very much.
Yeah.
So you can see in both of these images, that representation. So, looking at both of these, there seems to be no embarrassment, correct? Particularly here, she's busy, and they don't seem to be at all self-conscious, I'll put it that way. And particularly here, there's some sort of like mild level of flirtation, or in their gesture, in their glance at each other. This one, I'm going to show you again, Masolino. He paired with Masaccio, two very famous early Renaissance artists. We really consider the 1400s early Renaissance until the very 1490s, where you start to see Leonardo, the bigger, more prominent high Renaissance artists. But these two were extremely well known, and they paired in the frescoes of this incredible church, Santa Maria del Carmine in Florence. And this is all fresco. And Masolino, who you just saw, is right here. I apologize, I just can't think, because of this window, it's impossible to get good images of this church or chapel. And here is what I'm going to show you, another Adam and Eve right here. This is Masaccio's. Now, this would be an example of decoration, or historical and biblical arts used as decoration, because to teach from this, you couldn't focus. It would be too much going on. So this is Masaccio's, and it has an interesting history. First of all, we see that it's very different in emotion from the previous two, from Masolino's. Both Adam and Eve are just struck by guilt and shame. Adam has his face covered, Eve's wailing as they're being expelled. The one on the left, when Cosmo III de' Medici, this is in the 1670s, he ruled for 53 years as Duke of Tuscany. And during that period, there was some decorum, conservative decorum about nudity. And he had these, I suppose, fig leaves painted on this fresco. And in the 1980s, they were removed. So the right side is the restored side. But it's sort of an interesting story, I think, to see the two images together. And again, we have some architecture that is part of a classical world and not the Garden of Eden. Northern Renaissance, again, this is high Renaissance. This is same time period as the Sistine Chapel. And Albrecht Dürer was a wonderful painter too. He has a lot of paint, but he was well known for printmaking. And of course, the printing press was up and running at this point. He had his mother-in-law open a shop and he sold his prints. He made an absolute fortune. His prints are everywhere. So this Adam and Eve are again in that flirtatious sort of mode. The sensuous in their poses, glancing at each other, and she's hiding left hand, another apple behind her back as she's presenting to him. And this is really the world of the Northern Renaissance, the Grimm's fairy tales, sort of this dark forest. It's very typical of a lot of things there. It has a lot of animals in it. It has, here's an elk, an ox, a rabbit, a cat, a mouse, a parrot, and a goat. And some of these represent the four humors, which I kind of forget. I think it's melancholic, phlegmatic, sanguine, and choleric. So that's, part of the medieval world here in the north. And the sign up here is in Latin, and it tells us that he's from Nuremberg. He's Albrecht Dürer. He signs his name A. Dürer from Nuremberg. Familiar, I'm sure. Check out the left hands. Eve and the serpent. And the angel. And we see really two scenes, the temptation and the expulsion here. The last one on Eve is this one, the rebuke of Adam and Eve by Domenichino. This is in the Baroque period, and you'll see that he has adopted an image from the Sistine Chapel. This is so similar to the creation of Adam, where God is pointing at Adam and creating him surrounded by cherubs in this sort of shell shape. And here's brave Adam again, courageous, taking on the burning right. And, Eve, of course, is playing the serpent. And you see a lamb and a lion here. You always hear about the lamb and the lion lying together, and I looked that up, and it's not in the Bible. So it's interesting. We're moving now to, we're jumping, I don't know how many years, yes. Yes. Am I moving? Yes.
This that depicts the first creation story, in which Adam and Eve are equal. They're both created by God equally, and that's the first story. All the art's but the second story.
I haven't seen that. I bet there is.
It looks like the whole trend of creation
From his, the real,
seconds.
maybe just because it's more interesting. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. So we're jumping years and years between, the creation of Adam and Eve, and some significant things happen. Abel is murdered between here, and there's the flood, Noah survives, and there's the Tower of Babel. And then we have, the God sending Abraham to redeem the Israelites. And in part of his covenant with Abraham is a promise that he will have descendants and they will be the people who inhabit the earth in the future. And as we know that Sarah is barren and they become extremely old. And at some point in their late 80s or 90s, Sarah offers her Egyptian maid Hagar to Abraham, and they produce a son named Ishmael. And this is a painting done, this is Baroque period. Nesher was in Prague. We don't find any artists from Prague, oddly enough. He was a well-known portrait painter of very, very wealthy people, and you can see that in this image. And Hagar is sort of innocent, seductive, I don't know, passive, however you would see her looking at us, grabbing her silk garment, which is slipping. Everything here is rich, velvets to satins to brocades to silks. And Abraham and Sarah seem to be like a business contract. She's an attractive older woman. He's an attractive older man. And as you know, he was said to be rich in cattle, gold, and silver. And he is, I guess, receptive to this idea, or at least proposing it in this scene. There is a variation of that done, and this is from the Netherlands, Matthias Stone, also seen as Stormer sometimes. This is the southern Netherlands, and he actually did most of his work in Italy. And if you know the work of Caravaggio and those dark scenes he painted with a strong light and the contrast between dark and light called tenebrism, this is a big influence from Caravaggio. But we see definitely age on Sarah and Abraham, and Hagar's sort of hesitation in offering herself. 3 left hands here. This isn't exactly the right thing to do, right? So, here's Abraham's, it seems like, well, I guess so. It's really interesting to see images. I love though that these artists are so different. I mean, it's not like they saw one image and duplicated it over the years. I mean, they all seem to have such a different take on it. So the more popular of this story is the dismissal of Hagar. This hit the emotional side of the Baroque period. And most of the paintings, this is when art exploded after the Council of Trent. And the population there loved drama and emotion, and most of the paintings, even biblical or otherwise, were about that. So we have here Abraham dismissing Hagar and Ishmael. Poor little Ishmael's very upset, crying probably, and there's some hesitation, it seems, in Abraham. Hagar is upset. Abraham is again richly dressed. And of course, they're sent out into the desert, and I think with not a lot of money. And this happened because of Sarah's jealousy. And also, you know, things weren't going so well in the home front. And also she wanted Isaac to have the inheritance. So, and I didn't mention Isaac being born. That was about three years, I think, some short period of time after Ishmael. So Abraham here is dismissing Hagar and Ishmael. This looks so like Rembrandt to me, but in the 70s, some document was found in his studio or house that seemed to indicate that it was from the studio of Rembrandt. But anyway, it's so gorgeously Rembrandt, I can't believe it's not. But anyway, again, this tenebrism, this strong dark light contrast, and always in Rembrandt, these rich, rich fabrics. He was a costume collector, as you know, and he dressed everybody, used his family as models a lot of times, his either wife, Sachka, his first wife died, and he I'm not sure he married Enrique, but anyway, he used her as a model. So this is a fairly early Rembrandt. He died in 1669. So. And his beautiful etchings and drop points. This is teeny tiny. And this is, again, Abraham dismissing Hagar and Ishmael. Ishmael, you know, is a warrior, a great bowsman, and he is promised his own country and leadership, and it is the country of Iraq, or the Arab nation. And we see again the hesitation. This is the entrance to the house, and Abraham has one foot on the step and one foot outside with, you know, Hagar's, I guess, crying. She has a kerchief over her face. She has a wonder bottle with her. And here comes the happy doll. And oh, Sarah's up there gloating with Isaac in the back. There we have it. And it's very hard to find anything on Sarah by herself. She's just not popular to with portraits or stories. But this particular one, this is from Santa Maria Maggiore, the really old, probably the first still standing and built like it was Christian church in Rome. And it is practically all mosaic friezes going all the way around of the Old and New Testament. And this is where Abraham is visited by three heavenly figures, whether they're supposedly angels. This one seems more like God since it's designated differently. He welcomes them to come stand in the shade of the tree, and he feeds them. He goes out and kills a lamb, feeds them the fatted calf, and he assigns Sarah the job of cooking, of baking the bread. So here she is in her role as wife and housemaker and provider of hospitality. That's a different image. And whenever you see gold around figures, certainly halos, but gold too, it means that they're from heaven. A little bit different color. This is accurate color, but it's more detailed. So, Abraham sins at some point in life, and it's later, because Isaac is 40 when he marries Rebekah. He sends his servant into his home country, which is Mesopotamia, the city of Ur. They say Abraham was born there, and to find a wife. He doesn't want the wife to come from Canaan, where they are all living. And the servant goes with hesitation, but with a promise that he will recognize the woman to be the bride of Isaac, and that the woman will come with him. And he goes with 10 camels loaded down with gifts and supplies. And while he's there resting, a woman at the well leaves the well and walks past him and offers him water and offers to water his camels. And this is very unusual, as you can imagine, in this period of time for a woman to approach a servant that she doesn't know and make this judgment of hospitality or connection. And at that point, he recognizes her and she recognizes him. There's a connection from God that she's supposed to go with him. So changing styles of art, this is from the late, I guess this is more into the period of, well, it's really, he's an American painter, Benjamin West, who went to England to paint, to learn painting. He also studied in Rome, most well known for history paintings. He was also president of the Royal Academy there. And this is when the servant presents Rebecca with a bracelet and a nose ring. And fortunately, he didn't show the nose ring, but anyway. And her brother at this time, Laban, is watching. So Rebecca is the daughter of Nabor, and her brother is Laban, and we're going to see Laban again. But anyway, the servant requests from Laban and Nabor, can she go with me? I came to get a wife for Isaac, and she agrees and goes. And on the path, on the journey there, as they're approaching Canaan, she sees a man working in a field. And she says, "Who is that man working?" And right after that, she says, "It's my master." And at that point, she covers her face with a veil. This is in the Bible. And this is a beautiful sculpture. It's in the High Museum of Art, actually, of Rebecca covering her face. And this is out of modesty and protection. And I guess until there's the proper time to meet, you're not unveiled. I'm not real sure about the decorum of that. So they marry, and after 20 years, she's barren like Sarah, and after 20 years, she has twins, Esau and Jacob. I wanted to also mention about prayer, because Isaac prays for her for 20 years for her to have a child, and they're one of the best marriages in the Bible, one of the most devoted. It seems like not a lot of conflict, although there's some drama that takes place here. And she's the only place in the Bible that marital love is declared, but she declares that she loves him. And it's just a wonderful story, really. So the twins, Esau is the first one born, and Jacob is the second, but Jacob is her favorite. So eventually as they're grown, she comes to Isaac, and she tricks him, and she dresses Jacob like Esau. Esau is supposedly hairy. So she puts some sort of animal skin or something over him and presents him to Isaac, who's almost blind, for the blessing, so that Jacob would inherit the ancestral lineage. And she also at this point, Isaac sends him back to the home country, back to Mesopotamia in the Ur area, to find a wife. It's one more image of them, which is just so gorgeous. I know almost everybody in here has seen this. It's Rembrandt again, and this is the title, the official title is The Jewish Bride, but it represents Isaac and Rebecca. And I want you to, there's always controversy on everything. This gesture of his hand in her hand, I don't see this as sexual. It's more protective, I think. And I think it's an expression of love and, I'm gonna use the word ownership, like she's mine. That's how I read it. It has different interpretations, and it's interesting that they're not glancing at each other. They're both very pensive in this. And just to show off Rembrandt a bit, his surfaces are just so rich. not only in color, but in detail. And this impasto that he uses, these little dabs of paint in jewelry that just pop the image. Show you the image again. Look at his sleeve even. It's just so rich with costumes. It's, I think. I'd love to see his house. Anyway, so Jacob goes back to the land of Mesopotamia, to Ur. And I guess neighbor has died at that point, and he meets a woman, sees a woman, and she's watering her father's flock. And this is Rachel. And Rachel is the daughter of Laban, who is the brother of Rebekah. So Rachel and Jacob are cousins. So he falls in love with her, and he asks Laban, her father, he says, I will work for you for 7 years if I can marry your daughter. And Laban agrees, and the night of the marriage, Laban tricks Jacob and dresses or veils the older sister Leah and presents her at Jacob's tent, and they are united. And Jacob, of course, is furious later and confronts Laban. And this is the scene of the confrontation. This is, Terbruggen is a contemporary of Rembrandt's. This is Amsterdam, the Baroque period. This is called the Dutch Golden Age, this Baroque period of Vermeer, Terbruggen, Rembrandt, and that group. It's a beautiful painting, don't you think? Just compositionally, and we can read it. We know somebody's being confronted. Laban seems to not care. I assume that's Leah and not Rachel. But, you know, the story goes on. I mean, Leah has 4 sons by Jacob. It's said that God blessed her because she was unloved by him, so he gave her a lot of children. She's still, you know, she remains fairly unhappy, and he agrees with Laban to work another 7 years if he can marry Rachel. So Rachel is the second wife of Jacob. And Rachel, eventually, she's barren at first, the third barren of our 3 matriarchs. And she eventually has a son named Joseph. And we know the history of Joseph, which I'm sticking with the women, but, and before, Benjamin, her last son, is born, some other things, interesting things happen with Rachel. There is a point at which God calls Jacob back to Canaan, to the land he was born in. And he takes Rachel with Joseph and Leah, and there are supposedly 10 to 12 children at that point, back to Canaan. And Laban apparently has reneged on the money he promised and on the other promises made to Jacob. And they all 3, the 2 women and Jacob, agree to leave and go back to Canaan. And on their way, Laban finds them in their tent where they're resting and confronts the entire group on stealing the teraphim. The teraphim are the household gods, and no one can find the teraphim. And it ends up that Rachel has taken them, and she has them under the saddle. She's sitting on them, and when he comes to the tent, Laban comes to the tent, she says, I'm sorry, I'm in the way of women. You need to leave. So he leaves, and the teraphim are never discovered. But in the course of all that, Jacob says that he will put a curse on anybody who took the teraphim, because he didn't want them in the teraphim in their group. And when they reach Canaan, Rachel becomes pregnant, and she has her second son, Benjamin, and she dies in childbirth, and he realizes that he had put the curse on his wife. just terribly sad. Rachel is, buried, I'll show you grave in just a minute. And her second son, so her two sons, Jacob and Benjamin, are two of the 12 tribes of Israel. So she was incredibly important in the lineage of ancestors of Israel. This is her tomb, old photograph, obviously, that's outside of Bethlehem. Is anyone see this? All of you that have done the. And beautiful sculptures. Michelangelo had an enormous commission for the tomb of Pope Julius II. This is the Julius of the Sistine Chapel. And he never finished it, but he did finish these two. Rachel and Leah. Rachel is on your left, and she is penitent and prayerful. And Leah is on your right, who is still sad. They were sisters, by the way, because I said that. Okay. Moving on to the Moses era. Jochebed was the mother of, she was the Hebrew mother of Moses. And at this time, Pharaoh had declared that all babies be drowned in the Nile. And she took Moses, it's odd that she put him in a waterproof basket and floated him in the Nile, hoping, I guess, to get him maybe out of the area, out of Egypt. And Pharaoh's daughter, who's bathing in the Nile, sees the baby and rescues him. And at that point, the sister of Moses, she's not named at first, and we know it's Miriam. She sees baby Moses and sees that Pharaoh's daughter has rescued the baby Moses, and she tells the Pharaoh's daughter, she says, he really needs to be nursed by a Hebrew woman. And so they give Moses to Jochebed to nurse, so she gets to nurse her own baby. And then when he's grown enough or weaned, the Pharaoh's daughter adopts him, and we know that he's responsible for leaving the Israelites in Egypt. So it's a wonderful story, really. So we'll go to Miriam. This is back in the catacombs. There are several interpretations of this particular image. The one we know is that this is the Pharaoh's daughter because she has a crown, and these are probably her ladies in waiting. They're not sure if this is supposed to be Jochebed, who's put Moses down, or if it's Miriam, who is watching to see if the Pharaoh's daughter picks him up. But it's a gorgeous image, and look at the reeds. I just find the reeds fascinating. And this rich color is still there, 4th century. Everything in the catacombs was done in a hurry. You took your lesser known artists because nobody wanted to go in there because of the stench. And, so you paid less, you got a less sophisticated artist, a less trained, and yet everything in there is just magical, I think. It's just all so fresh and done quickly and spontaneous, I guess. Lots of gestures. Moving to same story of Pharaoh's daughter. Here we are in Venice. And Veronese, if you remember if you were here for when I did the Mary cycle and we looked at the wedding at Cana, the massive scale painting that Veronese did of the wedding at Cana. And everything he does, he was Venetian, he painted in Venice. This is late Renaissance, called Mannerism, the period. And everything was lush and rich. The Venetians would be rolling in money. So everything centered around that. So Pharaoh's daughter is, dressed, bejeweled, brocaded, etc. And here's the baby being fished out of the water by someone else. Stories vary, and this would be Jochebed, the older woman in the blue, and this would be Miriam, according to art history translation. But, and in the wedding at Cana, I don't know if you remember, there were dogs in it, there were dwarves in it, there were Africans in it. We use the word African in describing historical paintings. And here, same thing here. There and there. Normal, they were part of life, especially of royal life. And Miriam, when she's responsible for really on the outside looking after Moses. And she's responsible for the women as they're leaving Egypt. And after they cross the Red Sea, she breaks out in song of Miriam. And she, according to the Bible, has tambourines. Meanwhile, she's taught these women the Torah, and they all sing and celebrate. And Burne-Jones shows her with cymbals. And this is the pre-Raphaelite period. If you know Rossetti and that group of English painters who considered themselves influenced by Raphael, but different. And their work is beautiful, and all over England, it's a lot of, and Andrew Lloyd Webber has the largest collection. He has, like hundreds of their paintings. I saw an exhibit once at the Royal Academy, and you couldn't even get through it. There were so many. After the crossing of the Red Sea, Moses marries an Ethiopian, a Cushite woman, and Miriam doesn't like it. Her name was Zipporah, and she criticizes him and talks badly about him. And God curses her, and she becomes a leper. And at some point after that, she begs Moses, she and Aaron was in on it too. And she goes to Moses and asks forgiveness. And she's forgiven, but she's not healed. And she does die soon after that. But this is I think a beautiful color illustration from it's in a museum in Prague. So this would be, a woman who we think highly of, Miriam, who sins, who's forgiven. So the stories always wrap around. And my last person is Deborah. Deborah is from the book of Judges. She was the only female judge in Israel of the 12 judges, and she was a prophetess and a judge. And this was at a time when the Israelites lived in Canaan, and they were worshiping some of the Canaanite gods, and God got mad at them, the real God got mad at them. And eventually there was a lot of conflict, and Deborah decided that being a judge, she decided that she would lead the army against the army of the Canaanites. And King Jabin was the king of the Canaanites, and his general of the army was Sisera, and her general was Barak. And Barak would come at a moment's notice and help her with anything. And a judge at that period was like our judges, they settled disputes unless there was a war, and then they became warriors and led the army. She was the commander and Barak was the general. So they decide that they're going to move the Canaanites into the Hebron Valley, and they chase them down there. God sends a massive rainstorm, and the valley's flooded. A lot of the soldiers or the troops on the other side are drowned or stuck in the mud, and Sisera manages to escape and ends up in the home of Heber, and Heber's wife is Jael. Does anybody remember, is that strike a note with anybody? So jail welcomes him, gives him, lets him in the house. He's tired. She gives him milk curds to sleep. And she gets a peg from the tent and a hammer, and she puts a hole in his head. So she is considered a hero, right? Even though a murderer. And I think she looks during me this. This is Deborah and this is Barb. So, Deborah praises her after the victory. Deborah, there's Song of Deborah, this is in Judges. And it's a revelation of praising God, and also the very last sentence is praising jail. And this is an etching engraving, done by Gustave Torre. And he is one, along with Tissot, who do these huge cycles of women in of biblical stories, Old and New Testaments. And some are in the Jewish Museum and some are in the Museum in New York. But here she is praising jail. And this is the Song of Deborah in England. And she's represented here in all of her different roles as the judge, as the warrior, as a musician, and as a prophetess. So a very beautiful image. So that's it for today. Thank you for some patience.